Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Living in the West, a series of episodes where we look into the lives of Muslims living in the West as a minority, how they socially interact with the West, how they live in the West due to the economic dimensions involved, how they politically are active living in the West, what their future is in the West, and of course the most important issue, their Islamic identity living in the West. A very important topic that we're going to look into and expound upon. I have with me today Sheikh Haytham Al-Haddad from the Muslim Research and Development Foundation, an organization and think tank which looks at providing solutions for Muslims living in the West. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Welcome to Living in the West.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, Brother Jamil.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. A question I'd like to start upon, and one that all of our viewers who are watching the introduction titles, Living in the West. How important is it for us to understand the topic itself, living in the West? How important is it for Muslims who don't live in the West to understand why we're discussing this, why we're looking into this, say, 20, 30 million Muslims who are living in the West?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Nabiyana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. From a historical point of view, you know that Muslims used to live in Muslim countries. Mm-hmm. And if they are living in a Muslim country, they have their own circumstances. And the fiqh is talking about Muslims living in Muslim countries from different dimensions. This is a very important thing that we need to remember when we talk about Muslims living in the non-Muslim countries. Because Muslims now in the non-Muslim countries, the presence of Muslims in non-Muslim countries became a reality. It is not anymore a group of immigrants going to Britain or going to France to live on a temporary basis, to work and to come back to their original countries.
Working migration, people leaving from one land to another to work, as you said. Yeah.
But now they live there as citizens. This is one thing. The other thing is many of them have children, and their children are not anymore Eastern people. They are Western people, whether we liked it or not. Many of them, many of their children, the mother tongue of their children is either English or French or German. It's not anymore Arabic or Urdu or any other language. This is something that have to be in mind when we talk about Muslims living in the West. Apart from that, there are many indigenous Muslims. And those Muslims, they are not going to go to Saudi Arabia, for example, or they are not going to live in Egypt. They are indigenous Muslims. They are living in their own countries. They have their own relatives, mothers, fathers, etc. They are non-Muslims, and they are part of these societies. So, for those Muslims, how are they going to live? What kind of vision they should have? The other thing is, those Muslims living in the West, they are part of our ummah. All Muslims are considered to be one ummah. Allah Jalla wa Ala named Muslims as brothers. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً, wherever they are. So, what kind of contribution those Muslims living in the West can contribute to the Muslims in the East, to the ummah, in order for this ummah to flourish, in order for the ummah to be خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, as Allah Jalla wa Ala wanted us to be. كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You were the best of nations ever raised to mankind. So what kind of contribution those Muslims can contribute towards this ummah?
Okay, can I just ask you about the numbers? I quoted at the beginning 20, 30 million. Is this correct or is this exaggerated? I mean, how many Muslims really are living in the West, Sheikh?
Of course, there is no exact figure. But the minimum figure that I came across is 15 million.
Okay.
This is the minimum figure.
It's a substantial amount. It's not a little amount we're talking about.
And some other figures suggest that Muslims may reach to 25 or 30 million. For example, in Britain, the last census suggested that Muslims are 1.75 million. But many people say that the figure is far bigger than this figure. They may reach to 3 million. The reason is, many Muslims, they don't want to identify themselves as Muslim in the official figures, okay, or in the official census. This is one thing. Many Muslims have not been included in the census because they don't have the proper documents to be counted. And some figures suggest that those Muslims may reach to 500,000 in Britain. For example, France. They say France has the highest Muslim population in Europe. The official figures count Muslims to reach to around 5 million Muslims. But some people say no, they may reach to 7 million. This is in France. Similarly, in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, they say Muslims do not exceed more than 1.5 million. But actually, they are more than that. And name it. So, okay, whether this is the case or that, let us talk about 15 million Muslim living in the West. This is one thing. The other important thing is that now the West is talking about the demography of the capital, of the capitals, such as London, Brussels, Paris, and other capitals. Now, in London, for example, the figures suggest that there is 1 out of 10 Londoners. Some figures may reach to, may say that the Londoners, okay, 1 out of 7 Londoners is Muslim. 1 out of 7. Wow. Now, in Brussels, for example, they suggest that by the year of 2020, 1 out of 3 people living in Brussels is Muslim. Now, this is a considerable amount, and we cannot ignore these figures. So for those people, what kind of solutions we should provide them? What kind of vision they should have in order to preserve their identity, in order to contribute to the Western countries, in order to contribute to the Ummah. And they have two responsibilities. Their responsibilities towards the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah, and their responsibilities towards the population that they are living among, which is the non-Muslim population.
So, just a quick recap now. We've shown the importance of this topic because, say, 1/3 of all people in Brussels are going to be Muslim. It's a very important thing for the West to take into account, that we've got a whole number of alienated, sometimes, society. Before we go into looking at it deeply, just give me maybe a reason, as you're in London, you're working actively in the society there. Are Muslims actually taken seriously as a group, or is it something which they have to take seriously?
Well, Brother Jamil, you touched on a very important subject. And to be honest with you, I've been interviewing many non-Muslim thinkers, and some of them are working with the government and in many think tanks. And the West now, with regards to Muslims living in the West, is lost. They are trying to find a solution for this growing community, and they are unable to identify the best scenario for Muslims in the West. This is on my view. Maybe they have identified a solution, but they don't want to disclose it for Muslims. Maybe they have their own agenda, but as far as I see it, okay, they don't have that solution. Simply, the Muslim population is growing. Either Muslims, immigrant Muslims, or indigenous Muslims. There are many converts, and the conversion to Islam is becoming more and more. This is a very important issue. The Muslims themselves are becoming more Islamic. You know, for example, in London, you will be surprised that number of young people attend masajid for Salat al-Taraweeh is increasing dramatically. You wouldn't imagine that. Wallahi, Brother Jamil, I might not be exaggerating if I tell you that if you take some photos of some people going to the masajid in London, okay, during this Ramadan, you might think that we are talking about Bangladesh, or we are talking about even Saudi Arabia, or we are talking about Egypt, some of those countries.
It's a number which is growing
dramatically, not just growing, okay? And more people, more Muslims are becoming Islamic people. What do I mean by that? For example, according to statistics, recent statistics, in Britain, more than 50% of the Muslims interviewed by this poll is suggesting that Sharia should be incorporated within the British judicial system. That was not the case before. Number of sisters wearing hijab is increasing. The presence of Muslim in the public arena is increasing. Number of mosques is increasing. Number of Islamic literature is increasing. Now, in any news, whether British news, French news, in Netherlands, etc., you will find that on a daily basis the news is talking about Muslims, either positively or negatively. So it means that the presence cannot be avoided. Their presence cannot be avoided. Now, from the Western point of view, how can they deal with this growing population? What kind of solutions? Now, Muslims are demanding. They are demanding their rights. They are demanding the issue of education. They want more Islamic schools, or at least they want their the Islamic education to be included in the state schools. This is something the West, okay, itself or themselves, they are unable to deal with. The issue of the personal law, it is a very important subject. Now, maybe you have heard about the row after the comments of Dr. William, okay, Ron William, the Archbishop of the Canterbury. He said that Sharia may play a role in the British life. And after these comments, there was a row about what he said, because Muslims are demanding. So I think this point that you have mentioned is that what does the West, okay, or the Western thinkers, what is their proposal? What do they say about this point? This is something that we have to look at deeply.
Okay, this is a good point for us to stop on. Inshallah, we're going to return in a couple of minutes, inshallah. Please stay with us on this very important topic of living in the West. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Back to the Prophet. Join Sheikh Amar in the program Back to the Prophet, wherein he teaches us practical lessons from the Prophet's life and how this can help us to overcome our challenges in the present.
We talk about the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, seeking guidance for ourselves. In the early days after the revelation of the Holy Quran, the Muslims were greatly persecuted, so much so that quite a few Muslims had to leave Arabia and migrate to Africa to live among Ahl Kitab, Christian people who followed the gospel of Christ.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Living in the West. Sheikh Haytham, just before the break, we spoke about the importance of this topic itself. We spoke about some of the important parts that we need to take into consideration when looking at Muslims living in the West. You spoke about a vision. Is there any other important core parts that we have to look into, we have to take account for?
Yes. There is another important dimension that we have to take into consideration when we talk about this, and this reflects the importance and the significance of this topic, is that Muslims are facing different situations. Okay, they are not facing the same situation or the same situations that Muslims in Muslim countries are facing. So we need to talk about their fiqh, the jurisprudence of Muslim minorities.
What do you mean by this? We've heard this term many times, fiqh, jurisprudence. What does this mean? What is?
Now, this is a very common topic, and many people are talking about it. By the way, my PhD is talking about the fiqh of Muslim minorities. Such as, okay, a common question. Many people say that, okay, Sheikh, I don't find a halal job, a pure halal job. Is it allowed for me to work in Sainsbury or in Tesco or in any big supermarket? And inevitably, I will be handling khamr.
Alcohol.
Alcohol, okay? How? Either I will stack it, or the minimum that I will be asked to do is to stand on the till. And once I stand on the till, I will be selling alcohol. Is it allowed for me or not? And I do remember, as we are talking in a very casual way, I do remember one time a brother came and he said, Sheikh, I don't want to work in this field and that field because it is haram. I want to work in a pure halal job. What does he do? He decided to work as a postman. I said, okay, no problem. You can do that, okay, but I don't think that it is a pure halal job. He said, let us see. He started to work. After 1 month, almost 1 month, he came and he said, Wallahi, Sheikh, he's full of haram. He's full of haram. I said, why? I knew because I came across this question before. He said, sometimes you have to post pornography. Sometimes you have to post advertisements about banking system, about some haram issues. And he said, what shall I do? I said, this is the point that we have been talking about, that it is very, very difficult to find a pure halal job. Actually, in Muslim countries, you might not find a halal job, a pure halal job, because of the complex of the situation now, okay, whether in Muslim countries or non-Muslim countries. So it's difficult for you to find a pure halal job. How are we going to deal with this problem? Now, you have two different dimensions. One dimension is the dimension or those people who would like to compromise on everything. You are living in a unique situation in the West. You are not living in a Muslim country. You are not living under the Khilafah, the Caliphate system, and therefore you have to compromise your religion.
And like you're oppressed, basically.
You are, and this is something else. You are oppressed. For example, when many speakers are talking about hijab, and they say to Muslim women in the West, whether in America or in France or Britain, you don't have to wear hijab. Just give it up. And because they think that it is very, very difficult for a Muslim lady to wear hijab, either in a public space or at work. But they don't know the reality. And in the West, it's different from many Muslim countries. In the West, if you are fighting for your rights, if you are using all legal means to get your rights, you may get them. And we have to put that into consideration, because the more we compromise, the more we lose. This is a very important principle, and I believe that it is the golden principle, is the more you compromise, the more you lose. On the other side, there are some people who think that Muslims in the West should live an ideal situation, as if they are living under the Khilafah system or under a pure Islamic state. This is haram, don't do it. This is haram, don't do it. This job involves little bit of haram, then, okay, you should not be involved in it at all. The political dimension, you cannot be involved in any political process because the party is a non-Islamic party, and the party might have contributed towards maybe voting for the war in Iraq, or maybe that party is supporting the, let us speak frankly, the lesbians and the gays' rights, etc., etc. So therefore, it is not allowed for you to take part in the political process. But this stance is talking about a pure Islamic state that is taking al-Islam as the supreme law. But that is not the situation here. So in between these two stances, what are we going to do? What kind of solutions are we going to provide for the Muslims? So they don't lose their identity as Muslims,
That's right.
and moreover to progress. Because we don't want Muslims in non-Muslim countries to remain as they are. We want them to progress. We want them to contribute to their ummah and to their societies that they are living in.
Okay, I mean, so now you've expounded slightly, and we're going to go in deeper. But a point some people might say, because coming through from some of the overtones in what you're saying, is that people are speaking about the West. Scholars are giving fatwa about the West, about the Muslim minority being in the West. They themselves are not linked to the West. They have no understanding of what's actually going on the ground, what's happening in the West. How important is it for our Muslim scholars, the ulama, the students of knowledge, to really start looking into giving a solution which actually for those people? Because like you said now, somebody may give a fatwa from another country, and this group you're saying, the second group says, no, a fatwa has come from a Muslim country, we've got to abide by it.
Yeah. Here, we have two extremes.
Mm-hmm.
One extreme is saying that we should not take fatwa from scholars from the East or from the Muslim countries. And this is a very extreme view.
Yes.
We should not accept that. Because there are Muslims in Muslim countries that you cannot find them in the West.
Exactly.
Okay? On the other side, some Muslims are saying, no, these are the big scholars, and everyone agrees that those scholars are the scholars of the Muslim Ummah, so we have to refer to them in all our matters, without consideration of the unique situations Muslims are facing in the West. Let me give you a simple example. Okay? I'll give two examples. One example is the issue of hijab and the issue actually of niqab covering the face. In Britain, and by the way, in many American states, this is fine and it is allowed. And even in Britain, you can drive, a lady or a Muslim sister can drive her car with a niqab.
Yes.
And this is something common.
Yes.
If you go to some parts in London, like East London, or if you go to Blackburn, some other cities outside London, there are many sisters driving their cars with niqab. Now, this is something difficult to imagine for Muslims living in Muslim countries, because many Muslim countries don't allow women to drive with their faces covered or with niqab. So if a fatwa comes to a scholar who is living in that situation, who is living in a Muslim country, stopping Muslim women from wearing niqab while driving a car, what do you think he is going to say? He's going to say, no, okay, it's not, you are living, sister, you are living in a non-Muslim country and you might be oppressed, don't go that far. Maybe there is another opinion that says, okay, uncovering the face is okay, and so on. Even some of them might, and all of us have heard these views, they might say that you can even give up your hijab, not just covering the face, because you are living in the West. Okay? They don't know the reality. And I do remember that I have taken some scholars to East London, where there is a highest
population
of Muslims in London, in East London. And they were amazed. They said, we never thought that this is the situation of Muslims in the West. I said, this is an example. But, of course, the situation differs from one country to another country, from one city to another city, and that is very important. That's why sometimes we call for the shuyukh, the speakers, the muftin, who are talking about Islam in the West or Muslims in the West, to be very, very careful. And we would like to ask them that they should recommend that Muslims asking these questions to refer to scholars living in the West. This is from one angle.
This angle now, somebody may say, okay, this is fair and good, Sheikh. You've given a very easy picture there. Some people are extreme and don't accept any of the scholars. Some accept none of those, and some particular scholars. But the lay person, you said yourself, say 15 million in the West, the 9+ million or 10 million in America and Canada, they don't understand the differences between the scholars. They just see a guy who comes and quotes some Islamic verses, quotes some hadith, and gives a ruling. How should they approach it, our viewers? How should they approach looking into this scholar? I mean, this is a very important point. We don't have much time, but could you give me a concise sort of answer for this?
Yeah, we say for the lay people, as the scholar said, العامي مذهبه مذهب المفتي. يعني the lay person, he should follow the mufti. He has, okay, or she has trust in this person as a mufti, then she should follow his opinion, provided that she or he doesn't know any other opinion. If he or she does know any other opinion, then they should take the matter a little bit further and to investigate which opinion is closer to the truth. This is in a very concise way.
Jazakallah Shaykh Haytham for being with us on Living in the West. That's this episode of Living in the West. As you can see, a very important topic we're discussing, a topic which I believe is on the tips and the tongues of everybody in the West, how to live with Muslims, what's the importance of Muslims. I hope you join us in the next episode of Living in the West. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.